Hey, this is Norm from Tested. I'm here at BrickCon 2015, a big exhibition of Lego sculptures, castles, villages in Seattle. And this is David Frank, a builder of 5 years now, who at this year's BrickCon, your sculpture won Best Medieval Castle.
Yep.
Tell me about this sculpture. This is massive.
So this is actually a scene depicting the ending of book 2 for my wife's fantasy series.
Ah, okay.
So
some source material. Your wife is a fantasy author.
Yep.
And in her book, there's big castles and events going on. So it's a diorama, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So it started with a ship. It's a cross between a medieval sailing ship and a Mississippi sternwheeler, and it's actually powered by magic. So in this series, there's wielders and shapers. Wielders wield magical energy. Shapers can manipulate matter. So these people, the society's kind of based around that magic system. So in this case, this ship is operated by people who can move the wheel with their power. So I started with wanting to depict the actual the ship itself, and I'm like, well, man, it would be great if I could actually do the riverbank on the outside. And then I started thinking, okay, well, boy, the end scene is actually is a cool scene with a huge manor house, and there's a big battle that goes on. So that's kind of how it progressed into this monster you see before you. Now,
the source material you're talking from is text. Are there illustrations that you can pull from reference, or did you just talk to your wife and say, how did you imagine the ship? How did you imagine the manor? Is it all just based on the word descriptions?
Well, it's a good question. So we actually, when we write the books, she's the writer, and I have an overactive imagination. So it's kind of us brainstorming together. We kind of build the world together. I do a lot of world building. I make maps, diagrams, and then we discuss the plot and kind of come up with it, and then she writes it. So.
Now, with the architecture and even the ship design, did you take inspiration from historical architecture?
Absolutely. In fact, the ship, again, like I said, I kind of crossed, a Mississippi sternwheeler and a medieval sailing ship. The actual building itself, there was 2 beautiful buildings in England that I modeled the manor on. One was more of a plain building, but the overall shape was like this. So what I did is I supersized it. I made it larger.
Right.
And there was another building that had beautiful architecture, but it was almost a little too much. So I kind of combined the 2 architectures to make this.
Now, so what is the structure of this made of behind it?
Good question. So over the course of my progression of learning how to build these bigger structures, the trick is cost, right? Cost and also strength. So one of the things I learned to do, and you can look at this from the back, you'll see I use a combination of girder supports and arches. So the arches, they allow it to be a little bit stronger because you can kind of lace them together. But also you got a lot of open free space, so it makes it light.
So do you have any architecture background?
No,
or is it just practice?
It's just practice. Yeah, I just love it. I just love architecture, and had I to do it all over again, I may have gone into that field, possibly. So. You
also have some other builds here. Beautiful tree sculpture, floating town almost.
The wood is, I just love that look. It's really beautiful. And of course, as you can see, I like, doing the trees and the foliage.
Are you always on the lookout for new Lego sets and the pieces that pop up, or is there already a good enough of a database of the bricks to do everything you want?
It's funny. I used to look at sets, as the actual sets, and then I started making the transition to, it'd be cool to have these parts. And now I really look at brick almost like paint, like the different color palettes, like the pick a brick wall and the Lego. And when I look at the sets, I don't actually look at the sets, but the parts that are containing the color palettes in the, it's kind of a weird transition.
And I got to ask, how many pieces for this beautiful sculpture?
I honestly couldn't tell you. I could guess. One of the goofy things I do is I look at the Death Star. It's like 4,000 pieces, and I'm like, how many Death Stars would that be?
Right.
So that's kind of how I can sometimes approximate. But it's so tough because what you don't see under here is the structure it takes to get the height. And boy, it's just there's so much that goes into getting the varying heights, and
Is this something you're gonna take apart, or?
Oh yeah. So one of the things I learned when my first BrickCon as an actual attendee was in 2011. And I built something that had an exterior and an interior because I wanted to make a play set, something that could open up and you could see. The challenge though was when you actually get here to display, do you show the outside or do you show the inside? Also, when you build an inside, it's more fragile, so it's harder to move. So I quickly learned I got to make it stronger, and I got to build it in such a way to maximize the display potential for the audience.
Right. And then eventually this lives in your home, or does it all go back in the bins?
So typically what I do is I'll take some really good professional pictures, I'll post it on my Flickr page, and I'll take it to a couple conventions, and then at that point I feel like I've kind of shown it enough, and then I can take it apart and then go to the next thing. because it's really about the next build, the next creative process.
Just like a real artist.
Yeah.
You're a Lego artist, and that's why you got to go to these Lego conventions, because if you aren't going to see it in person, it really doesn't do it justice. It really is a beautiful sculpture. Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, thank you for your
for
time.
sharing with us, and we'll see you on Tested. Bye.